I first met T when he came back from Vietnam. My cousin Kirby Feathers, and he came back on a bus with two brief little satchels, and they called me and said, "Can you come pick us up?" And yeah, so it was my first meeting with him. And because they were back and they just wanted to go out in the countryside and just everything, we spent many, many weekends together. And I just slowly developed a real friendship with T. And we listened to Beatles music and all those tunes that they really liked. The White Album came out during that time of the Beatles, and so we listened to that a lot. And Rocky Raccoon, my gosh, we just sing that all the time. But he did have to go back to Fort Bragg, or go to Fort Bragg. And so by the end of the summer, he was heading, by spring, he was heading back. And so we continued to write, and then he came back again, and that's when we started really kind of looking at each other in a little different light, because we, like I said, started out with a friendship, and so that was real important, so we had a real concrete relationship. And by August, he was going to get an early out, and we decided to get married. And so he came back, and we had a real little tiny ceremony. Just the witnesses and my mom and dad, and I don't even know if my sisters were there at that time, but it was just kind of, let's just get married. And thinking back on that, even our marriage license, it was just kind of comical in a way, because all the witnesses signed in green ink. They couldn't find a black pen, and that made us laugh. We thought that was pretty funny, and it was just really a formality that we were going through, because the paper didn't really mean that much. It was just that we wanted to be together. We didn't have any big fancy wedding. We didn't have a big fancy honeymoon. We went to Lawton, in fact, and stayed at the Capri Motel. And then we went to his folks' house and started preparing to go to Santa Fe, where we set up a home. And T's dad, kind of, when we pulled out, we were in this big orange pickup with a camper and everything. We were just loaded with all of our things. And he made the comment that we looked like grapes of wrath. And I did get a job very quickly there. So T.C. Cannon was a very handsome man, first of all, and he was kind of mysterious in a way. He's very private, had a wonderful sense of humor. And in fact, I saw a picture recently on a little film that someone put together, and had a picture of a still of him laughing, just laughing. But you don't see photos like that, very rarely. He didn't like to necessarily be photographed, but he loved to take photos. And you didn't necessarily see him laughing like that, except in private situations when a camera came out, not so much. But he had a wonderful sense of humor, and he was very intelligent, and just knew a lot of different things. He was very diverse. There wasn't any one particular thing that he would focus on when we converse, and a wonderful musician, writer. I had wonderful letters from him, and artist. The art part of him was tremendous. He was very talented, and that was a real attraction to me. He was very gentle man, kind man, soft-spoken, but yet very, he had his own power, and you could recognize that very quickly, I think. Well, one thing that comes to mind when I think about, and it's a merging of the humor and also his art. When he was in Fort Bragg, he sent me the back of some kind of a label, and it was a picture of Rocky Raccoon, his rendition of Rocky Raccoon, and he was in a Western outfit, and said, "Babu, this is a showdown," and we used to call Kirby Babu. I don't know why, we just did, but it was just a silly little thing, but the artwork was superb, and it just to remind me and us about that Rocky Raccoon song and everything. But and in his writings, he would write poetry. He would write sad things, funny things, because it was like his letters were like poetry. And sometimes there'd be little lines in there. And he had a pet name for me and things like that. And I don't know if I want to say that, but he used to call me the Pink Lady. And that was partly because he was making fun of me because I was so light. And but he'd write about that every now and then. And he would, you know, on the serious side too, he would talk about having children, and he'd like to have lots and lots of children. And we never did have any children together, but it was something I think that he really wanted. And oh gosh, his sense of humor just was amazing, and something that I really appreciated. And I can't really focus on any one particular thing, you know, as I think back. He was just so creative. You know, there's creative personalities, and he certainly had that creative edge. When we were in Santa Fe, he had his first show there, and he wanted to do all these things. He got canvas and turned it into a big stretched hide, buffalo hide, and he, you know, just was constantly thinking of things. And collage work, he'd be cutting out little things that he was going to put on a painting. Words and phrases and faces. He read a lot. He was quite a researcher, and so and he put a lot of thought into everything. But he was very creative too, you know, and just really just everything that he did. To me, he was just such a thinker. He was always thinking about. He didn't do anything. Everything had a purpose. You know, it just wasn't something that happened by chance with him. Well, he was. TC was very proud of being a member of the Kiowa tribe, of being Caddo, of being Native American, period. And he had a tremendous sorrow for the plight of not only his tribes, but all of the Native Americans in the process of the development of these United States. And he was a very kind and gentle soul, and anyone that had any kind of, was subjected to any type of torture or trauma or whatever, he had a real compassion for that. So he was very compassionate in that arena, and that really came through in his work, very much so. And of course, like I said, he was a researcher, and the more he researched, the more he realized what all the Native people have gone through. And so, and you see that in a lot of his work. He wanted to celebrate the Native American, and so you see them in the traditional ways in a lot of respect, but there was other works that he did that really showed some of the traumas of our existence. One painting that comes to mind is the Andrew Merrick, and he painted that while we were living together in Edmond. We had a home, after we left Santa Fe, we moved back to Edmond. And Andrew Merrick said, let them eat grass before any Native American would live today, or something like that. He said, let them eat grass. I can't remember what the quote was, so this is going to have to be edited out. Let me think of another one. There was another painting that he did while we were living in Edmond, and it was it had the nuclear bomb in the background. And he was very concerned, you know, coming back from Vietnam, the horrors of war, you know, he saw that firsthand, and so that was something certainly that he had a strong feeling about, and he put the Native American in front of that, and in front of that A-bomb. And so that, I think, had a strong political statement that here are these Native peoples, and here this is also going on in the world. He had other things that just celebrated. When they had the Bolo Ball and had his show here in Oklahoma City, there was one beautiful, beautiful painting I saw of a snake dancer. I think it was a Hopi snake dancer. Absolutely tremendous, most beautiful colors I'd ever seen in my life on a piece of work. And that's what a celebration of, you know, of that culture, that it still exists today, you know, after thousands and thousands of years. And he appreciated that and wanted people to also appreciate it, and so he did that very well through his work. I believe that T was like many, many other Vietnam veterans, where it was very, I hate to say traumatized, but he was very much affected by his participation in that war. he loved life so much. You know, that was a real death situation, and I'm sure that was very difficult for him to go through and to see people dying, whether they be of some other nation or whatever. But I think that was real difficult for him, and to see his comrades too, the people that he lived with on a day-to-day basis, see them die and not make it through that war. When he came back, even when Kirby and I were going out, they never really talked about that. It's not something they wanted to do. They wanted to kind of forget that, I believe, and so we just laughed a lot and just had just focused on anything and everything. They just wanted to see the countryside and go places they haven't been able to go to for years, and just really enjoy that, see friends, old friends, but it wasn't something that they ever really focused on while we were out. And when we were married, he never did talk about it that much. He never really did. And I think that's very typical of a lot of the Vietnam veterans. When they get together, though, alone, without someone that's not a non-participating Vietnam veteran, you know, it's got to be someone that has that same experience, they will really talk about it. Yeah. So it wasn't something that he shared with me a lot. We were in Santa Fe for I guess it was about a year. We left here and found a little apartment on well, I can't remember the street now. I used to know the address, and I still drive by there. In fact, this little duplex, a little one-bedroom place, and we were both attending school in Santa Fe, and I had left Oklahoma a junior and entered the College of Santa Fe like barely a sophomore, so I lost a lot of hours that wouldn't transfer to that college, and of course he was just beginning, so it didn't really affect him, but it really did me. And that was part of the reason why we came back, because I had put so much time into my education, and then I was almost having to start over, and they required so many other courses that I didn't necessarily want or need. And so that was what really spurred us on to return home. We both were going to attend Central State University in Edmond, and we were accepted, and so we moved back to Edmond and got into a little house, and it had a studio, which, you know, that just made his day, you know, when we found that. And so it was a really good experience, and we even took an art class together. It was funny. There I was, this little beginning artist, trying to do all those little requirements, those stills of the apples and fruits and all that. And very quickly they saw his talent, and they said, "You don't have to come back to class anymore." And I had to stay in there the whole time, you know. And at the end of the semester, he turned in a painting, and that's how he got his A. But you know, he constantly was showing them things and doing things in all the other classes. So. But my little beginning art, he didn't do those things that I had to go through. There was, I don't think, anything that he could not put down on paper, and it would either look exactly like what it was supposed to look like, because he did some portraits for my father, and they just look like photos almost, but then he would do caricatures too. And all different types, whatever he wanted to, however he wanted it to come out, he could do that very easily. To talk about T.C. Cannon and try to explain to someone that had never met him what type of person he was, I think that's very difficult, because he was very complex, you know. I think that had a lot to do with the type of intelligence that he had. He's a very complex individual, and someone that he was very cautious about letting people get close to him until he assessed you. And he had to be very confident that you would be someone that he could trust, and that he could talk with very candidly or whatever, or exchange conversation with. I think, though, that because he was so genuine, he was very humble in many ways, very honest, almost, I mean, he could have a real sharp tongue, you know, if he felt like he needed to say something very directly, he could be very direct. And in other instances, he would be kind of skirt around issues to see, kind of feel you out to see how you would react to things. But he was, had a lot of compassion. I think the biggest statement that he has about his personality is all reflected in his work, 100%, because he is all of those things. He's the cultural part. He's the part about the wars and in his paintings, and the women that he portrays. How he feels, how he really paints females in a very beautiful light. I think has a lot of respect for them. So I think that's really the T.C. Cannon that people should know, because that was truly him. Sometimes I think because I saw so many of the sketches beforehand, before they ever became paintings, and some that he didn't do for years and years later, that I just think, yeah, I can remember when he was, really thinking about this and researching it, and he didn't ever talk to me about them, but he would show me the sketchbooks and things like that. But he was constantly, working on something. I even have some of his school papers where he was supposed to be taking notes or doing a test, and there are all these little photos with, little pictures of faces that I later saw in paintings. T never did really try to bring me into the work that he was doing by explaining his artwork, and sometimes I would go in there and say, what is this? What is this? What are you trying to say? Because I was not as creative an individual as he was, certainly, and so he didn't necessarily share a lot with me unless I just really brought it to a point. But as I think back in later years, especially since I've gone through a lot of the things that we had and kind of trying to keep them in good order and things like that, I found a lot of his school papers where he was supposed to be taking notes or writing something, and these little faces would be on the sides and on the side of the paper, or lines from a future poem that later on I did see in a lot of his works. So he was constantly thinking about his art. And I think that's one of the signs of greatness, of the real genius that he was, that he could be doing two things at one time, and and he did very well in school, always did very well in school. And he didn't have to pay such close attention where he couldn't continue doing his work too. Well, I think most of those were directly related to his father and the Kiowa people, because those are Kiowas that he's showing, in his grandmother and things like that. That's really the fierce pride that he had of being a member of the Kiowa tribe, and the real reverence that he has for his father. And he certainly did for his mother also, but he had a real reverence for his dad, and it was the same way. His father just really cared a great deal for him, and still does, of course. But I think that's what those tell me most of all, that this is his family, this is his life, and he's a part of that. And these are older people in the traditional clothing of the Kiowa people, but that was T.C. Cannon. He and his dad were very close, and his father, from what I understand, of course I wasn't around during his growing up years, but really took care of him, really did talk with him and work with him, and explain things to him about his people, and just, genuinely, he genuinely loved his son. And T, of course, had a lot of respect for his father, and I think they were just real close. They were almost like friends in my mind. I'm sure his father can tell you that much better than I, but they were very, very close. When we were in Santa Fe, I think that's where I met a lot of TC's friends. Mike Lord was there, and just different ones that he was very close with while he was going to the Institute of American Indian Arts. So I did meet many people. Normally, any social event that we had was it wasn't like, a big herd of people. It was maybe 4 or 5 people, a very intimate type thing, because you have to understand that T and Mike Lord too, they love to play the guitar, and they like it a little more subdued, not so noisy, no big bands going in the back or anything like that, and they like to talk, just really converse on funny things, on serious things. So it was more intimate it was, the better it was. I think T truly loved Oklahoma because he grew up there. He had many wonderful stories from his childhood, and good and bad stories, and but primarily good. And his people were here, his family was here, and so he has a real attachment to Oklahoma. Santa Fe, though, is very, I think it's a lot like his personality. There's the creative atmosphere. It just, you can just feel it when you went to Santa Fe. A lot of artistic people there that he could bounce things off, that he could look at their work, and might give him ideas on what things that he might do to different colors, different mediums, or whatever. He loved the mountains. We used to go hiking, and we went to Bandelier, did a whole overnight thing, and that was just a lot of fun. In fact, it's a little funny part. I didn't have hiking boots, and he had his army boots, and but I kind of muddled through with something that I put together. But on his army boots, he used a knife, and he cut little grooves in there to give him more traction. We weren't very rich or anything, and we just had to make do. But we didn't care. We just wanted to go hike and spend some time out there, and we just really would talk and look at things, and we really enjoyed nature, a lot. But the mountains are very majestic, and I think he always likes to paint them in his paintings too, if you notice. And so he just has a real strong feeling for the mountains in general, especially in that area. I think in Santa Fe, the primary thing that probably he focused on more than anything, besides the fact that there was another culture out there, another type of Native American that he found very appealing, and became very friendly with some of the people. One Taos family adopted him, in fact, into their family. But he had such a strong reverence. That was something very new, something that he was very, I think, intrigued with in painting and in depicting that particular culture, because he could do his Kiowa culture from memory, from his own mind, but this was something very visual that he could see. As far as the people in Santa Fe, I think later on, certainly, and certainly after he died, people really picked up on his artwork. But his earlier works, I'm not sure that they were as supportive as they could have been. It was certainly more than he got from Oklahoma, because that was one thing he knew that he could never really sell here. He was not particularly interested, however, in selling, in making $1 million or anything like that. His burning desire is to get the things that he had in his mind and in his soul on that canvas. But for some reason, Santa Fe, and I think it's just because of that whole creativity there, that feeling, because you can go there today and you still get that creativity that was necessary for him to get some of the colors. The colors are different out there too, and he was very much into color. So I think Santa Fe just was kind of helping him to make the evolution that he eventually did make. When we were in Santa Fe, we went out there with little or no money, and I was able to get employment very quickly and go to school, and so we got settled in right away. But we still didn't have a tremendous amount of money or anything, and this painting that you see behind me is one that was originally given to me as a gift for my birthday. And in fact, there's another painting underneath it that's the original painting that he did. And it was kind of like a landscape, a very abstract landscape of an arroyo, but it had some white circles, like it almost reminded me of a concho belt, but I really did like it. But he gave that to me for my birthday. Later on, when he needed to have a painting for a show or something, he said, and we didn't have the money for canvases or anything, he needed to use that particular one. I said, okay, so he chiseled over it and created this one on top of it. He He was a romantic in a lot of ways, and he did this wonderful poem for me for Valentine's Day, and I have it hanging up here on the wall too. And it talks about his parents, about growing up in Caddo County, and us, and just a lot of little things. And if you knew what was behind all those words, it would really put a smile on your face, and that's what it does to me when I read it. Well, it really, to me, it was just a reflection of our situation at that time. But he also knew that I would keep that forever. And he did all of his own stretching of his canvas and everything, so we didn't. I would buy in bulk as much as we could, but not to any extreme for quite a while. When I got word that TC died, I was going to school, continuing going to school at Central State University, and I got a call from Robert Harcourt early one morning, and he told me that T had gotten killed in a wreck around Santa Fe. And I can't even remember the rest of that conversation. That's all I remember him saying, and I don't know what all we said after that, but the next picture I have in my mind is I had a window that faced the west, and I just stood there looking west, And I really couldn't believe it. It had been quite a while since I had even seen him or talked with him or anything, but it was very devastating. I remember it was very painful, and still is. I had a dream within the past couple of years, and in my tradition, when you dream about someone that has passed away, normally they never talk to you. You never hear words, and you never hear their voice or anything, but there's a communication. And in this one particular dream, and after he died, I had many dreams about him, but he never talked. And so that's very typical after someone dies. But in this one, he was talking to me, and we were having a really nice time, and we were holding hands and walking around and looking at trees, and just a lot. It was just so vivid, and we're just kind of being with one another, And then later on, it seemed like it was such a long dream, and later on, and he said, well, I've got to go, and I'm going to set you free. And I just looked at him, I thought, T, just like that. It's like I would normally talk with him. And he said, bye, and he walked off. And I think sometimes I think he was really communicating with me, because I have held on to his memory for a long time. It's a very special man. Yeah. It's just that death part that really, because it was so hard. Yeah. He was just so alone, when that happened. It just. Usually, around his anniversary, which is tomorrow, I get real emotional. Sometimes I'll get out my old letters, and they don't make me sad at all. They just make me smile. Well, because I know when he was talking, and I mean what he was talking about, and the times that we were experiencing, and it's just like a flashback of a movie, that I'd seen, that I liked, So it's real pleasant for me. There's nothing sad about them at all. I think T's paintings are extremely important because they're a part of history. He's made his place in history through his art, and that not everybody can say that they've ever done that. He depicted everything in the true light. Some were through his own eyes, and I think that's real important, because we need to be able to see what he saw, and I think he conveyed that very well. He portrayed both the negative and the positive of our life, and that's important. Not everybody can see that, but anyone that wants to see T.C. Cannon's work has to see that part too, the good part and the bad. Some of the bad parts that I think that comes through his paintings is the plight that we have had in history, and that partially, and sometimes to a great extent, continues on today. We're still very misunderstood, and we have this tremendous culture that has not died out over thousands and thousands of years. And so for people to understand us, I think that's really very important. We're always talking about it, and he did it in a very visual manner, where we could see it in these brilliant colors. The good things about T's work, I think, is primarily how he documented the culture, because every generation, you know, they might modify their clothing somewhat, they might change their methods of doing certain things, and so in this little quadrant of time when T.C. Cannon was looking at our culture, he got that down on canvas. He got this little span of his life, through his own perceptions, through his research, through his visions, through what he saw on a day-to-day basis. He was able to document that section of history, just like a film. You know, you can do a documentary, and it's not going to be like that in 10 years, but it was for that period of time.